Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. We're excited today to be diving into a conversation with our special guest, Cherian Koshy. Before we kick off, we want to just remind everyone that if you're looking to take your fundraising event to the next level, we have the Elevate conference coming up in just about a month. We're coming up
That's crazy.
March 12th and 13th. It is a 2-day hybrid event. We hope that you'll join us and sign in and log in from wherever you're at and get ready to take your fundraising event to the next level. It is a place for us to have some shared learning and to talk about things that are innovating in the fundraising event space, which leads us to today's conversation, which is to talk about what is happening in the nonprofit sector and where we're seeing innovation lead in the nonprofit sector. So we're excited to dive in with our guest today. Kristen, let's kick it off by introducing everyone to Cherian.
Let's do it. Cherian Koshy is a transformative leader in the social impact sector with over 25 years of expertise driving change through innovation and strategy development. As the treasurer of the Global Board of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, he has influenced philanthropic standards worldwide. Cherian's creation of the nonprofit OS, now Engage, an AI-driven platform, revolutionized operational efficiency and social impact and served as a model for organizational transformation in any sector, culminating in a significant acquisition by a leading market player. His role as Vice President of Product Strategy at Kindsight, a global technology firm, showcases his ability to integrate advanced technology with strategy and social impact, offering lessons in innovation and efficiency relevant to any industry. His approach translates complex ideas into practical solutions, proving valuable for professionals in social impact, businesses, and beyond, seeking to leverage technology and strategic insights for sustainable success. Cherian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. And now that everyone's hit that 30-second speed up through the intro, I think we got everybody back.
Please. I think the thing that I appreciate most is that you bring all of those essential technological pieces through a human filter.
Yes.
In a very practical way that our nonprofit friends who sometimes glaze at the technology front can really lean into. And that's what we're hoping to do with today's conversation. So to open us up today, I am going to ask you a little bit of a crystal ball-y sort of question. As somebody who leads in nonprofit efficiency and ideas around AI, big picture, where do you think the nonprofit sector is headed in the next 5 years? There are a lot of threads that are sort of leading down very different trails right now. And I'm wondering what thoughts you have about sort of what you see coming.
For sure. So this is going to be rather contrarian. And we'll see how well you and your audience like what I have to say, and maybe you won't have me on ever again. And that's totally fine. First of all, thank you for having me. This is really a pleasure. It's always great to hang out with you two and be able to talk about important subjects. And I love the podcast and the work that you all do. Someone once said that you can be a futurist if you predict what and not when, or when and not what. And so I'm going to be bold and say, I think in the next 5 years, what I worry about nonprofits encountering is what I call streamlined stagnation. This is where an overemphasis on efficiency creates a loss of human touch that's essential to missions. So we've all dealt with effective altruism as a concept in the nonprofit sector. There was just a recent article in the New York Times about this. And the idea is that organizations are all striving for greater efficiency. And there are good aspects to efficiency, and there are totally bad aspects of efficiency. Streamlining some operations, cutting costs, and leveraging data all have good and pernicious aspects, but they can also risk eroding human connection. So what I like to say is that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So this drive for efficiency that we have, which can be good, can often lead to a transactional mindset where donors are only data points and the people or causes that we serve are all reduced to metrics, to numbers. Yep. And that can alienate supporters and undermine the foundation of why we're in the business that we are in, why we do the work that we do. So I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, even though some friends in the sector definitely call me that. I do want to say that there's a way out of this paradox, this stagnation paradox, and that is to balance operational effectiveness with being efficiently human. Meaning we're embracing technology. We can't get away from some aspects of technology, but we're not sacrificing empathy and personal touch that inspire the connection that people have to the causes that we have. So essentially, the challenge isn't to do more with less, but to do more with heart.
I think there is absolutely nothing contrarian in that. And I would have you on this podcast every week to keep screaming that from the rooftops. I do think, I think we as a sector, as with so many sectors, the shiny becomes the thing.
Yes.
And we get enmeshed in the what and the how and lose that why, and that why driving that human connection and all of those pieces. And so I love that, especially as somebody who is enmeshed in technology, saying, hey, I'm going to throw this up here. Be careful.
And I want to start with that because everything else is going to hang from that framework. And it's important for us to know that this is truly a bit of a paradox. We don't want to go too far to the left and say we are Luddites and we're never going to use any form of technology whatsoever. I don't think anybody's in that boat. But what I do think is contrarian is that a lot of board members, executive leadership look at the shiny technology object and say, that's the thing. And it loses the reason why our organizations exist and how those are at their core relational. And so if we over-index on the right side of the track, we'll lose staff, we'll lose donors, we'll lose the core of why we are here. And that's what I worry about.
Well, and I think too, what becomes interesting is that you can put any tool in front of anybody. But specifically for fundraisers, you have to be in relationship with people.
Yeah.
Which means you have to talk to them. And I think often people are looking for a way out of that, which begs a bigger question for those individuals to have in the mirror with themselves about what their personal mission for work is and what they actually want to be doing.
Yeah. There's an interesting dynamic I find too, that our nonprofit friends had this really, I mean, like we all did, this really big push during the pandemic into a force to do things differently. And some good and some bad came out of that. But I think we're sitting in this time where we can kind of look ahead and think about when we are choosing to adopt new tools, new technologies, when we're thinking about evolving what we do and how we do it, we can be a little more proactive instead of reactive. So I'm curious, as you look ahead in the next 5 years toward sort of that striking that balance in the nonprofit sector, how important do you think being innovative is going to be for nonprofits to continue to be mission focused?
So I will say that innovation is not optional, it's existential. And what I mean by that is that every organization will change more in the next 5 years than it did in the last 20. And for every individual person that is listening right now or watching, whatever medium you choose, your job will change more in the next 5 years than it did in the last 20. So the interesting piece about what you all just said is that in the past, we had a sense that we knew that things would change and we would address them as they came along. Now the pace of change has increased rapidly, exponentially. And so we fall prey to the risk of being Blockbuster in a Netflix world when relevance and expectations of our community, and I don't mean just donors, our community, our volunteers, our stakeholders, the world around us has even greater expectations, perhaps the wrong expectations of how nonprofit organizations should function. But as we've talked about, we now have the ability to have a bit of foresight to say some pieces of technology are actually not good, or not useful when used in a particular way. So if we think about the tools that are out there, the existing tools might be helpful, they may not be. They depend on how we approach the use of that tool, whether it's to rediscover and enhance communication and connection and authenticity, or it's to bypass that for a quick dollar. Mm-hmm. And if we keep asking the question, what's the next big best tool out there, we're going to lose track of how are we creating moments for the people that matter the most. Maybe it's the person that we serve. Maybe it's the person that we collaborate with. Maybe it's the person that donates money or donates time. What is the moment that matters to that person? And when we ask that question, the technology can help support that and navigate that. And the technology will enable us to innovate around those experiences, around those moments. The tools are amplifiers, not they're amplifiers. They're not detractors. They're not substitutes for the work that we're doing. So if we pair the technology and the tools with these bold ideas, then I think organizations are innovating in a way that drives that mission work in a way that's relevant to their audiences, that compels people to lean in, to act, to believe in the cause. And, that creates a kind of mindset shift where it's not about more tools in the toolbox. It's about creating a more meaningful solution, one that really matters to the people that you're talking about.
Yeah. I love the idea of utilizing the tools and the technology to make the space for the connection. And I think I can hear smoke coming out of ears around some of that, because I think we're trained that those are oppositional in a lot of ways, right? And so I think that precludes conversation at some point too for people, in that they hear like, yep, nope, I'm out, right? Like, I'm still working on a Dell computer from 1996 or whatever, which is probably true for some of our organizations, right?
Absolutely.
But I'm wondering too, in terms of potential, can you, for folks who are like, I need tools, I want to do work more efficiently, yes, I want to do this, can we bring it down to ground level a little bit? What could that look like for our nonprofit fund? Like, in a practical way, like, do you have an example of an idea or a tool and how they might use it that might create those moments for them?
So, rather than talk about a particular tool, what I would say is think about the greatest potential around innovation as being thinking differently about the work that you're already doing. How do we and it's sort of a back to basics approach, right? So we often, as you all mentioned, like, we're looking at the shiny new object and this tool for outreach to our community. But as you all are super familiar with, when the pandemic happened, you were at the forefront of the space of innovating and reinventing, repositioning what events looked like. But it was not because the technology was fancy and cool. It's because it enabled an ecosystem of the community. People could interact virtually. They could interact in a hybrid way. They could interact in a live in-person way. And all the things enable that co-creation of community. So as you think about what is the thing that you can do and practically do as an organization, it's to essentially not go at it alone, not approach it from, I need to think of this as an internal achievement, some piece of work that we're doing that we can sort of showcase, but rather to kind of flip the script and say, how do we pool the expertise of our community into a way that's creating a new future for our organization, a co-designed solution. Essentially, like your organization is a co-working space. Like your organization is a place where people gather to do really important work where nobody's necessarily an expert. So innovation requires a level of humility. Absolutely requires a level of humility that says it doesn't matter who gets the credit, whose logo is at the top of the marquee or whatever. It's about looking at the problem that's out there and saying, how do we work together to solve this problem? And so collaboration tools are probably going to be the most essential component of any sort of innovation coming out of the next few months or years, right?
Yes.
Because the ability to connect vital players together and say, okay, you have this lived and learned experience, I have this lived and learned experience. How do we put all of those pieces together to create a new, better thing that 1 + 1 = 5, not whatever we were doing before to solve these sort of systemic problems. I know that doesn't like exactly answer the question that you were hoping for. I just don't know that there's a like particular tool that's going to apply to every audience member that's like, oh, this is use this thing and all of your problems will be solved, like some magic wand from Wicked.
No, yes. Oh, Wicked. No, I think that exactly does it. I just want people to start to think about what are we doing this for, right? And I love when you're talking about this co-design new future, and when you're talking about the collaboration tools. I think what that sparked for me was, perhaps there's a way for us to finally get out of, as organizations, in office, working from home, and that being the essential argument, be in the office, be at home. What is that? It's like, no, how can collaboration look different, right? And what can that be? And thinking bigger and working together to design that space versus somebody tapping into a structure that's being established for them that maybe does or doesn't work, and vice versa. So I think that's a perfect example of people thinking about, we're all in this mission work. How can we do that more efficiently to make how we're working together better, which makes more time and ideas for, and it keeps rolling downward for mission.
Exactly.
I think too, the thing that sort of sparked for me is that our partners who are in the technology space, like yourself, who are working in a technology software platform tools for the nonprofit, they sit in that hub where they can collaborate with lots of different nonprofits and hear what are the pain points, what are the needs for resolution, how do we do this more efficiently and better. And I think, in our world, we're often leaning into really Luddite basic forms of how do we bring people into space together. Yeah. But those tools are actually advancing very quickly and are diving into things that I wouldn't know where to start with, right? And that's the big transformation I've seen in the nonprofit sector of events is that AI is being slowly integrated or very quickly integrated in to the background of a lot of our tools that are helping to make our data tracking faster, our, auction package, collection faster, things like that. But I'm curious what you're seeing in the way of nonprofits adapting to AI. Are you seeing that sort of become something that people are fearful of or leaning into? What's that look like for you?
Well, I've had quite the privilege over the last, particularly last year, of traveling all over the world and talking to organizations that are adopting a wide variety of different tools at a wide variety of different paces. And so there are absolutely organizations that are not adopting it at all, that are, do not want to engage with it, and then organizations that are on the cutting, bleeding edge of whatever the new and greatest AI tool is. What I often tell people is that every decision along that spectrum is the right one, as long as it has some core why to them. I'm not trying to convince anybody to use AI or to adopt it in their organization. There is a level of inevitability because of what you mentioned around it being jammed into every version of every product that's out there, right? So whether it's Microsoft Office or Google products or anything that you might touch. There's an AI element to that. Apple Intelligence is now on my phone, and Gemini and like all the new hardware also has AI built into it. So you're going to get pulled kicking and screaming into the new AI era, regardless of whether you are ready for it or comfortable with it. It's part of the experience. And so what I would say is that pace will inevitably accelerate based upon the integration with different systems that we use, particularly systems of record. So meaning like your CRM will have some AI component to it at some point. The challenge that we face is that the amount of data, and this comes back to our earlier conversation around how our jobs and our organizations will change. I remember like baby Cherian, first fundraising organization ever in the 90s. Like we didn't have data. We had like transaction records. That was basically all we had. Maybe some contact reports that were written on like, you know, and we did them in triplicate on a typewriter, literally on a typewriter. My first job, I remember having to get typewriter ribbon as other duties as assigned. So the amount of data that would be accessible would be very limited. Now we have data everywhere and not an insight to be held. Yeah. So there's this concept called data rich, insight poor that AI can help us navigate because of the truly volumes of information that are produced about Kristen and Sam every single day. Yeah. Like you would be shocked. Maybe you wouldn't be, but it's absurd how much, like everything that you scroll by, everything that you click on, every email that you open, like the volume of data on each one of you individually is astounding. So is that useful to organizations? Potentially not. But as you think about how this applies to your organization and to your work and to you personally, because let's not forget that we are both producers and consumers in this world, that there's a whole element of adoption and strategy that comes into play. And I've now talked to a lot of organizations who are kind of diving into what does this mean for the day-to-day work that we're doing, the long-term work that we're doing. And again, we need to step back and say, how do we create a foundation of trust internally with our teams, with our organization, so that individual staff members don't feel like we're adopting tools or technology or AI to replace them as staff members. That's going to create change management problems inside of our organization from the get-go. And we're already seeing those pieces where people will use AI inside of their workflow, but they won't tell their boss because they're worried about their boss saying, well, why do I need you? Yeah. I can't tell you the number of times I'm at conferences or workshops where people are telling me, like, our organization prohibits the use of this particular AI tool. We're emailing stuff to our personal account, using it on our phone, and then emailing it back to ourselves.
Interesting.
That demonstrates an absence of a trust-based environment inside of the organization. Not to mention what I would say is the landmark study that Nathan Chappelle and I did around donors and their perception of AI, where it is important that we cultivate a layer of trust, a foundation of trust with donors about how we're using AI, and that we're transparent about that so that nonprofits can navigate that space. And we did it primarily because we did it personally. We're competitors in the tech space, but we did it personally because everyone was talking about how nonprofits are adopting it without discussing how donors might perceive our interaction with the AI universe. And we can't do it without them. We have to co-create this narrative. We've got to build on a shared understanding of how and why we're using it. And the how and the why have to interact in a way that creates that authenticity.
Well, and what's interesting too about that is that transparency also reminds folks that the user is human and the impact is human. You know, I think I think if we just assume AI is in use,
right,
like that is safe to assume in so many ways right now.
For sure.
And if you don't tell me that, and I assume that of you, we're out of sync a little bit, right? Because I don't know what's coming at me, if it's you, if it's being passed along by you. So I think more information and more clarity here just erases all of that.
Yeah.
And you're utilizing it as the tool it is, but then you're also showing your humanity as a user to be like, and I'm bringing this down and I'm looking at you and we're in relationship and I'm figuring out and we're figuring out together in this space what is useful.
Mm-hmm. We had an organization we were working with last year that they were utilizing AI to better serve the homeless community by creating profiles and portfolios that each individual that walked in their door could create as their personal custom plan. And then it would report out their metrics of like what sort of results they were having, what their impact was, how quickly they were able to get stabilized housing, how quickly they were able to achieve goals that they had established for themselves, which was a showcase piece for them to donors and a showcase piece to their funders, but more importantly, a data sort of interpretation set that then went to the state to better understand our housing and homelessness challenges in the state. Sure. And so that level of like clarity and transparency with donors became something that a lot of donors really leaned into and were excited about.
I can only imagine. I mean, there are absolutely powerful potential aspects of AI and a whole bunch of technology tools that can really solve a tremendous number of problems. And that's what I'm most excited about. But I think we've got to all be careful of, I have a presentation around authenticity in an age of artificiality. Yeah. And so as we navigate some of what's supposed to be human, the messy, like uncountable stuff, we have to really make sure that we're clear about what are the places where technology has its rightful place at the table, and what are the places where this is not the right table for you, technology tool. This is the right place to advance the connective tissue between two people. And so the example that I give is like, I will remember conversations that I have with donors and the things that they say, so that I can draw back on that and say, hey, remember when we talked about this thing that, whatever you, I think, Sam, you complimented me on a jacket that I was wearing in New Mexico. And I was like, oh, that made me feel really good. Like, I will remember that kindness that you shared with me, right? That's not a data thing. That's not I guess generally it's data, but it's not a thing that AI needs to be part of, or a technology tool needs to be part of. So as we kind of think about all of the ways in which we interact with our stakeholders, with our community, how are the ways in which technology can interact with the right parts of that?
Yep.
And then where's the last mile part of the delivery, right? Like Amazon does all of this fancy stuff with AI to deliver blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, a human, at least for now, a human brings me that thing to my door.
Yep.
That's the piece that we can't forget about.
Yep. I think you started some of this as an idea, and I'm wondering if you have a little bit more thought on what can organizations do to be more resilient in facing some of these changes, whether it's technologically broadly or AI broadly. Like, those are happening to organizations filled with people that have either good leadership and co-created spaces and structures or not. What are places of resilience that people and organizations can focus on as those changes keep happening to equip them to sort of meet that moment?
So I'll come back to this idea of humility. It's about knowing that change will occur, that we cannot know what will happen next week, next month, next year. And as we can fully anticipate that there will be some sort of change, we also recognize that we don't know what that change will be. Nobody was going to predict a global pandemic. Nobody's going to be able to accurately predict economic recession or, what the Fed's going to do next month or whatever, right? So we know that change is going to happen. We don't know what the change will be. And the idea of resilience is the concept, and I would not necessarily recommend reading this book, but it's the concept of anti-fragility is the idea of how organizations can expect that a change will occur and be ready to adapt to that change. From a practical perspective, I would say that nonprofits can do a few things to be ready for that change. One is to know that where their revenue will change over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. That might mean the source of that revenue, the size of that revenue shifts will occur. So what I would say, and this is generally true, that individual donors give when the economy is going well, corporate and foundation giving, while a smaller piece of the pie, because it's often sort of retroactive on formulas and whatnot, create a counter-cyclical, I'm trying not to use really big words or words that people are not familiar with. But like if you think about an investment portfolio that you might have in your 401k or whatever, you want to have a portion that is stocks and a portion that's bonds. Yep. Diversifying that revenue stream enables you to be more resilient as you weather certain changes. So you can expect that there will be a recession at some point in the future. How do you balance that out? And I've worked with a number of organizations where almost all of their revenue is foundation, federal grants, corporate money, whatever. And then if that money changes, then they're in big trouble. Yep. The same thing is true on the other side. Like if you rely on a core group of major donors and that revenue shifts in any kind of way, you've got to navigate that. And the worst time to figure that out is in the moment that it's happening.
Right.
Like major donor says 50,000 instead of 100,000. Oh my, how do I deal with this? This needs to be a plan today. Like literally today, sit down and figure out how to navigate some of those issues. The second aspect that's super relevant to this discussion around technology and AI is around your team and how is your team upskilling and reskilling to be able to meet the challenge of the day around adaptability. The key piece of that for your staff and your volunteers is to approach what's happening around you with curiosity rather than fear. It doesn't matter if you are an AI expert or you are a technology, super person, or you are a relationship person. And, those aren't mutually exclusive concepts, but leading from a place of curiosity and looking at tools and training and kind of fundamental principles to navigate these new challenges. Innovation is not a thing. It is the nexus of a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we put all of these pieces together to learn and to grow? And then the last thing that I would say is do an exceptional job at the things that you think are basic. Everyone listening is great at their jobs, but there are some things that professional level athletes understand. And it's that repetitively doing the basic fundamental skills are what makes you an exceptional player. Yep. So things like donor stewardship, be really, really good at that. Lots of other things can fall away. If you are really good at donor stewardship and building those moments and building that what I call donor muscle memory, if you can encourage that and strengthen that bond, a lot of other things can get messed up or you lose track of those things. Those relationships are your safety net in the moments where you need that resilience, because you're looking at lifelong partners who can actually be ambassadors of your organization and help you move forward through whatever challenges you face.
There is so much good there. There is so much good there. We are going to take a brief break and thank some of our sponsors and partners. And when we come back, we're going to keep this conversation with Cherian going. We'll be right back.
Unleash the power of events to energize your donors and amplify your mission. Join us at the Elevate Conference in 2025, where you'll learn the essential tools for planning a successful fundraising event. Book your tickets now for March 12th and 13th. This dynamic hybrid conference, hosted at Avenue in Portland, Oregon, and streamed live for our virtual audience, will equip you with practical tools, demos, and templates that you can put to work immediately. Don't miss out. Secure your spot today at Elevate 2025. Visit elevatenonprofit.com to register now. Elevate Conference 2025 is brought to you by Swaim Strategies and the AV Department, powered by elevatenonprofit.com.
All right, welcome back. Before the break, we're talking about things that can help us to be more responsive and more stable as we're looking at the evolution of
resilient.
Change.
Let's be resilient.
Let's be resilient. And I want to talk about, there is sometimes, I think, a fear in the nonprofit sector about change. I think change is one of those things that often is really scary for folks. And I want to know what your recommendations are for a nonprofit about where to even begin to start to think about innovation. How do they take an approach if maybe that hasn't been a part of how they've operated in the past? Specifically thinking about leadership, our boards, our executive directors, if they have been in a place of, but we've always done things this way, and the world is changing quickly, how do we start to shift that mindset?
So what's interesting is that of all of the like hundreds or thousands of organizations that I've spoken to in 25 years or whatever, very few organizations will actually embrace and hold up the banner of we've always done things this way. They will, until the moment where it comes out of their mouth, right? They will tend to think of themselves as adaptive and responsive and whatnot. But the fear of innovation is the fear of any sort of change management model. I'm sure there's a few books on theory of change on my bookshelf behind me. The fundamental truth of every change management process that I work with any organization, whether it's strategic planning or in any sort of like individual scenario, is that in order to be able to get over the hump, to get started, that first step, it's to really start small and the micro level of small. We tend to look at innovation as like this big, huge shift. And people are scared of big, huge shifts.
Yes.
That is not how our brains are wired, literally not how our brains are wired. We are not designed to do that kind of thinking. So the goal would be to make a very small modification. If you've read Tiny Habits or Atomic Habits, this is the mentality that organizations need to take. Don't try and think about like, I need to run a marathon. Think about setting out your shoes the night before. Don't even put them on. Set out the shoes as a reminder that this is your goal. So when organizations are faced with this, huge element of change, they want to have transformational, groundbreaking change. They want to upend their organization. If they want to do so, that's sort of the mentality they come into it. And like, we need to do things radically different. And what I tend to share with those organizations is that is not actually what you want. Because what will end up happening is that a few people will have this idea of what transformational change will look like. And most people will be pulling and, like clawing it at what they've had before or revert back to that system. Everyone in your audience knows what it's like what it's like to go through a CRM change where people are frustrated, they're mad, it's taken years. They're like, why are we doing this? All these obstacles. So the best book, and the Dan Ariely's book is maybe right there on my shelf. I had the chance to work with Dan a little bit virtually, and he has this 3B behavioral change model, which is barriers, benefits, and I'm going to forget the other third. But point being, if you identify what those barriers are, you can identify these tiny little friction points, right? Yeah. That are inside of your organization, a donation form, a is a really good example of something that causes friction all over the place. I love like secret shopping organizations and picking up the phone and trying to call someone to make a donation. If you've never done that with your own organization, highly recommend you have a friend try and call and make a donation. It is like really hard to do. So for a lot of organizations I've worked with. So as you think about kind of creating those like micro moments of change and then building on that momentum, that's the way to get into an innovative framework, a mindset of constant change and constant improvement, because you do live in a world of constant change. Yep. Surprise, surprise. Like each one of us individually, institutionally, we live in a world of constant change, but we don't want to negotiate that change in a big way every single day.
Right.
So make it intuitive and effortless to make a little tiny change, and that will grow over time. That's like the TLDR. Even that was long, but the TLDR of like a lot of work in the space, in the, nonprofit space, but generally in the behavioral change space.
Well, I love what you were saying earlier about coming at it from a place of curiosity, because I think that when you come at it from a place of curiosity focused on our work, our why, our mission, sometimes that curiosity is leading to just the little pieces of, is there a reason this is happening? Is there a way that this could be a little bit better that doesn't necessarily put anyone under threat, right?
Yep.
Like, you need to do everything different. We need to totally transform how we're doing things, which, I think there are like innovative leaders who are constantly on that precipice of big, new, and that can be exhausting as a staff member to try to catch up to.
Yep.
But leading and having a culture within your organization of asking why and having curiosity about impact and how we do things. Kristen and I work with an organization called University Innovation Alliance. They use a tool called process mapping. And it's just an opportunity for them to think about when they see a challenge, to go through the process, just like you said, have a friend call, see what it's like to actually make a donation, and map what that experience is and where maybe that gap was. So I love that idea of coming from a place of curiosity, because I think that the curiosity leads to more collaborative thinking versus coming at it from that big reaching for the stars. We have to be doing it better, bigger, different.
And so Dan has this example of process mapping around getting coffee. And so what I think process mapping helps with is that we often oversimplify decision-making processes, internally or externally, right? Like we're like, oh, I want coffee. And that's the decision that we think about. When in reality, if I want coffee and it's like outside of my home, I need to brush my teeth, decide what I'm going to wear, put on the clothes, get in my car, drive to a particular coffee place, get in line, look at this giant menu, make a decision, interact with the barista, and then I have my coffee. Each point in that process, and I skipped over a whole bunch, right? Yeah. Each point involves decision fatigue and friction. So we make the assumption that we're just going to send out direct mail, but all the other pieces that come into that person's life impact whether they open the mail, whether they interact with the mail, how do they respond to that mail, an email invitation, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. All of those things are much more complex than we think they are.
Yep.
And there are so many elements of behavioral science and nudges that come into play as part of that. So you absolutely have to start small to be able to make real lasting change.
Yep. And I'm wondering too, so if change is the constant, do you think it is possible for organizations to approach innovation or these smaller micro changes within organizations to meet the moment in a way that actually that becomes the stability?
It does, as long as there is a North Star guidance. I'm originally from Minnesota, so we do a lot of North Star references.
Love it. Love it.
like the idea of the North Star. So what I would say is, in general, when you're thinking about innovation, those concepts around authenticity and trust are critical North Star components. But your organization's mission, vision, values, those are the North Star stabilizing influences.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're thinking about like AI and technology, a lot of what I would talk about is data-driven empathy. Are we, and that should seem paradoxical to some
It does, absolutely.
Right? So how do we use insights and data to understand, to know our audience better, and to be able to connect with them more meaningfully? So this enables us that sort of last mile mentality of, how do I know what's the right door to knock on? Do I knock on the door? Do I ring the doorbell? Do I call first? Those are the data-driven empathy moments, right? If I know that someone has, a really excitable dog or a kid that's sleeping, that knowledge, that data point drives my ability to empathize in that moment and make an interaction that is appropriate for that moment.
Yep.
So think about data as more than just like demographics, but patterns and preferences and passions that help us navigate the space and then create a stabilizing kind of base of how we then proceed with our next steps, our next interactions with folks.
Yes. Yes. I was struck by the idea of empathy through data, because I think that does feel paradoxical, but I think it's spot on, is that we're able to do more when we know more, and we're able to connect more when we know more. There was a time period, I remember probably a decade ago now, where I was encouraging our development directors that we work with to follow the social media accounts of their donors, and often got resistance from folks who said, "Oh no, that's so intrusive. Why would I do that?" I'm like, it is a public forum where people are posting knowledge about themselves as they want to be perceived and known. And what a tremendous opportunity to better know your donor.
And if you don't, someone else will.
Right.
That's exactly right. People gravitate to places and spaces where they feel seen and valued and heard and understood.
Absolutely.
So that can either be you or it can be somewhere else. But they will go there.
Yes,
they will.
They will all go to those places and spaces, and we will retreat from those places that do not see us, do not hear us, do not understand us.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Seth Godin speaks to change as an opportunity, not just as the scary thing, but as an opportunity. So I want to know, what are the opportunities you see ahead?
So I think the key thing, we've been talking a lot about change and change management, which is like honestly a huge, huge subject. But what I would say is the biggest opportunity for individuals and organizations moving forward is to view change as alignment. To look at, what if the challenges that we face, and every single one of us individually and institutionally will face challenges all like next week, next month, next year. What if those challenges are actually invitations to become more authentic? Instead of seeing them as barriers, seeing them as invitations to be more authentic. And how does that get us clearer about our why and leaning into that clarity? So the challenges are essentially the crucible in which the dross is removed, and we can find that pureness of who we are and why we do what we do.
That's exciting.
That is super exciting.
I think it sets a tone and an opportunity for nonprofits to be more human, to be, when you're thinking about being more aligned, is, really to be showing up for the thing that makes the biggest impact in the way that impacts you the most, and doing the thing you're best at.
Well, and we, I think, are going to continue as humans in bed with technology to move in a space where that's actually going to be a really critical point of differentiation.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
100%.
It's going to be a reminder to people, oh, right. And people are going to gravitate to those spaces too, because the volume of noise happening around them is so much.
and a tsunami of noise.
Yeah,
that's coming at them.
It's shocking how quickly things are changing once we have AI in the scene, to see that AI is actually informing and teaching us to move in faster ways and evolve in faster ways, that I'm curious to see really kind of where those moments burst the dam into our most authentic human connected selves.
Yeah. So I want to take a minute and talk about Kindsight.
I've heard of them.
You may have heard of them. They've been leading in this work by building more cohesive, comprehensive tools. I'm wondering, can you share with folks who are new to Kindsight what Kindsight is and how they might be able to use it in their work?
Yeah, so for decades, Kindsight was iWave, which provided insights into donors. And then over the last year, we've rebranded and created this, what I would say, new company called Kindsight with those core values in place. But Kindsight is built on a simple principle, which is that integration allows insight to flourish. So as the pieces of data come together, as the tools come together and they're able to talk to one another, as a fundraiser for so long, what I always struggled with was tools that didn't talk to one another.
Yep.
I just wanted the tools to talk to one another. So if your tools are able to talk to one another and they're able to give you insight, then you are able to take that insight to be able to talk to your stakeholders, to your donors. So imagine artificial intelligence that not only tracks donor behavior, but suggests personalized engagement opportunities for how you could take on that last mile conversation. And that's what I think Kindsight is. It's sort of a virtual, if you will, chief innovation officer that sits alongside you and gives you an idea of what those insights can be so that you can take the next step that would be most effective.
I think the thing that I love about the sort of the launch of the new brand and the new product was that it had an aha moment for me, because when I get overwhelmed and have a lot of things coming at me at once, like the to-do list is long, I frequently freeze in the state of like, where do I even start? Yes. Kristen's really good at like pulling me out of that freeze and saying, start here. Well, that's what, when I first learned about the sort of new product launch, that was the aha I had of, oh, it's doing that for me. It would be the like tool to say, start here. Next, here's where you move with that donor, or here's where you could focus on, best and biggest impact. And I love what you all have launched. I think it's an exciting tool, and hopefully one that organizations are looking at as a resource where technology can start to talk to each other.
I mean, that's our hope. And I mean, it won't take any action for you, but hopefully it will give you a running start at that first action. And as of air date, we've launched something that I think is really, really exciting, particularly in the AI space. And I'm excited for what this looks like to get even more tools talking to one another and make it just a little bit easier for us fundraisers to do our job.
How dreamy is that?
so that the humans can go human. I love that.
Yes.
We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get in the fundraising elevator. We'll be right back.
We've been partnering with Greater Giving for over 20 years as our go-to event auction software. Greater Giving allows us to do our job planning fundraising events even better, because we can manage guest lists, seating, bid number assignments, and sales all in one place.
That makes it great for our nonprofit partners and their guests. Check out Greater Giving for your next event at greatergiving.com. Link in the show notes.
Cherian, let's go ahead and hop into the fundraising elevator where we're all headed up. I'm curious to know if you have a tool or tip you would give to our folks out there that are looking at innovation as the way forward. What recommendation would you have for folks?
So we've been talking a lot about innovation, and I think a lot of times when people hear the word innovation, they think of somebody tinkering around in a workshop and coming up with like a brand new invention.
Yes.
Like a new robot, a new something, like a light bulb, like a literal light bulb moment where they built something that's completely new and different. And so what I want to, like, my big tip for everyone, whether I'm advising a nonprofit or a business, is that innovation is not invention, it is iteration. You're Your job is not to reinvent the wheel. It's to take the wheel and make it a little bit better. I'm a firm believer. I did a little bit of financial advising for a minute, and I'm a big believer in the idea of compounding.
Yep.
So if you take one thing that's working really well in your organization and say, how do I make that 1% better? That small change to make it a little bit better. Then our mindset, our shift in thinking is that it will become 1% better every single time we work on it. And our goal is not to do it and then set it aside and we figured it out, but to always be iterating to figure out how to make it just a little bit better. And that effect will compound over time to create big and sweeping change. And if we don't do that, if things get 1% worse, or we look at it and we kind of let it sit, then that compounds as well in a negative way. And I think that's why we see challenges with donor retention or other issues in our sector. But at every organization, if you take this one tip away, I try not to be, like Coach Rory Vaden says, don't be a should head when you talk to folks. And so I got to be clear to enunciate when I say that. But what I would say every organization, every individual should kind of do is a consistent focus on small improvements that compound into transformational growth.
Yep. And I think what's interesting is sometimes the ease that people can lean into that with is that 1% better can be for you. Meaning your frame and your want to make things easier for yourself or to reach this next place or do this a little better, that will filter out into the work as well, right? That it can come from that place of personal investment in you being able to do your job better as well.
I also just appreciate the idea of leaning into the thing you're doing well and doing it 1% better versus always looking to fix the thing that's not working. Because I think we get so stuck in, we got to fix this and we got to fix that we miss the opportunity to improve on the things that we're excellent at.
And the reality is, like, if we accept the premise that big change is harder to do, looking at the flaws and the problems and whatever, and trying to make that sufficient enough, the delta there is really hard to do. And you would have to put in so much work to get it to a standard that would make a difference that it's typically the wrong strategy. If you look at, if you read kind of the strategy books around all the things, incremental improvement on what you're doing well actually leads to greater outcomes. So it's not just a good mentality. It's not just a nice thing to say on a podcast. It academically, scientifically results in greater progress to improve on the work that you're actually doing well, because it already affects the experience that people have with your organization. Your donors, your volunteers, your community members already like you because of a certain thing. Yeah. So making that even better lends itself to that compounding growth in a meaningful way.
I love that.
1%, people.
That's
1%.
my
focus on 1% increments.
That's the top of my to-do list now.
It is. Cherian, I love talking to you, and I could do it all the time. And I'm hoping that this has just piqued some interest for folks to be like, there's some ideas here. I'm going to noodle on them, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to noodle on them 1% more. If folks are interested in engaging you, following you, checking out your work, where should they do that? How should they do that?
Well, first and foremost, I love talking to you both. And again, very much appreciate you listening to me blabber on about random things for all this time. If people do have, they have not been completely turned off by my contrarian ideas, kindsight.io is the company, and we blog there. I have my own website at cheriankoshy.com, and I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn, but I'm the one that looks like me in the profile picture. But would be happy to connect with anyone who wants to talk more about these ideas and other ones, and hopefully we'll meet up in person too at some point.
I love that. We are going to put links to all of these in the show notes. Cherian, we look forward to crossing paths with you soon. And thanks so much for being here. But what's more than that, thank you for all you do for the sector.
Yeah.
You are a deep thinker and change maker and thought leader in the sector, and we appreciate all of your work.
Well, and without minimizing it, right back at you both. Appreciate you both and all that you do for the sector as well. I can't wait to see you both again.
Thank you.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV Department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Before we leave, I want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV Department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV Department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.